Farmer and dog find car covered in leaves. What was inside changed their lives forever. Arthur Harrison was walking along the trail that cut through his rural property in Tennessee when his faithful canine companion started acting strangely. At 68 years old, the farmer knew every inch of that land inherited from his father, but he had never seen Cooper, his golden-haired dog, bark so insistently at a pile of vegetation. It was when Cooper began digging frantically that Arthur noticed something metallic beneath the leaves that had accumulated for decades. His eyes widened as he recognized the shape of a faded blue bumper emerging from the green. With trembling hands, he began removing branches and foliage, slowly revealing a car that seemed to have been swallowed by nature. Arthur's heart raced when he managed to open the driver's door with a sharp creak. There, on the passenger seat, was a rusty metal box that had withstood the test of time. Inside it, yellowed documents and faded photographs that made the world spin beneath his feet. It was the face of Thomas, his younger brother, smiling in the old photographs. The same Thomas who had disappeared 40 years ago after a terrible fight over the division of the inheritance left by their father. Arthur sat down heavily on the damp ground, holding one of the letters with handwriting he would recognize anywhere. The words, blurred by moisture, were still legible enough to break his heart into pieces. "My dear brother Arthur, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness after the horrible words I said that day." The farmer's hands trembled as he flipped through letter after letter, all addressed to him, all never sent. Each one told a part of Thomas's life after leaving the farm, his failed attempts to come back home, always stopped by pride and the fear of rejection. Cooper approached and rested his head on his owner's knee, as if sensing the weight of the discovery. Arthur stroked the dog's golden fur, trying to process 40 years of secrets that had just come to light. One of the letters was different from the others, written on newer paper. In it, Thomas talked about a heart condition that prevented him from traveling, about the children he had raised, and about the regret he carried every single day. Arthur stored the documents in the box and carried it home, walking slowly along the trail, while his mind buzzed with memories he had tried to bury for decades. The wooden house where he had grown up with Thomas never felt the same after that day. His wife, Margaret, was preparing lunch when he walked into the kitchen with the most lost expression she had ever seen in 50 years of marriage. "Arthur, what happened? You're pale as a ghost," she said, drying her hands on the embroidered apron. He simply placed the box on the kitchen table and began showing the photographs to his wife. Margaret knew the story of the fight between the brothers, but she had never seen Arthur so shaken. "Where did you find this?" she asked, picking up one of the letters. "In his car. It was hidden in the woods, covered in brush. Cooper found it." Margaret read a few lines of the letter and her face hardened. She had never forgiven Thomas for the cruel words he had said to Arthur on the day he left the farm. "Arthur, that was 40 years ago. No point in reopening old wounds," she said, handing the letter back. But Arthur could no longer think about anything else. That night he stayed up reading letter after letter, discovering that Thomas had tried to come back several times over the years, always giving up at the last moment. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit that like button and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Arthur decided to go into town to try to find out more about Thomas's whereabouts. His first stop was at the registry office where he had registered the farm years ago. "Sir Registrar, I need information about my brother Thomas Harrison. He disappeared 40 years ago, and I just found some of his documents." The registrar, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, checked the old records. "Ah, yes, I remember the case. Your brother came here a few times over the years, always asking about the property. The last time was about 5 years ago." 5 years? Arthur was surprised. "He was alive 5 years ago and I didn't know." "Yes, he was, Mr. Arthur. In fact, he even bought a piece of land in the neighboring town. He said he wanted to be close to his family." The revelation hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. Thomas had been nearby all those years and he never knew. Back at the farm, Arthur found his son David, 45 years old, fixing the pasture fence. David had inherited his father's practical nature, but he had always been more reserved when it came to family matters. "Dad, Mrs. Margaret told me about what you found this morning." I think it's best to leave the past where it is, David said without stopping his work. David, your uncle might be alive. I can't just ignore that. And what's the point now? You suffered for 40 years because of him. Why go through that pain again? Arthur understood his son's concern, but something inside him had awakened, an urgent need to find answers that he could no longer ignore. That afternoon, he decided to visit Mrs. Dorothy, the closest neighbor, who had lived on the adjoining property for over 50 years. If anyone knew something about Thomas, it would be her, Mrs. Dorothy, a 72-year-old lady with always neatly combed white hair, received Arthur on her flower-filled porch. She had the sharpest memory in the region and knew the history of every family. Arthur, dear, sit down. Would you like some coffee? Thank you, Mrs. Dorothy. Actually, I came here to ask about my brother Thomas. Today I found his car hidden in the woods. Mrs. Dorothy's face changed instantly. She was silent for a few seconds, nervously stirring her spoon in her coffee. Arthur, I knew about the car. What do you mean, you knew? I saw when it was left there, on a night of heavy rain, a long time ago. But I thought it was best not to meddle in other people's business. Arthur felt his legs go weak. You saw Thomas? I did. He came here sometimes from a distance, looking at your house. He never had the courage to get close. The revelation that Thomas had been so close all those years felt like a knife to Arthur's chest. How many chances for reconciliation had been lost? Why did you never tell me? Arthur, you were so hurt by your quarrel. I thought it would be worse for you to know that he came back and didn't have the courage to talk to you. Arthur thanked Mrs. Dorothy and went home even more troubled. Margaret noticed her husband's state and tried to comfort him, but he was determined to uncover the whole truth. The next morning, he woke up with an idea. He remembered Henry, a former farm employee who had worked with him for over 20 years before retiring. If Thomas had been lurking around the property, Henry might have seen something. He found Henry at his small house on the outskirts of town, tending to a vegetable garden he kept to pass the time. The 65-year-old man still had the upright posture of someone who had spent his life working in the fields. Mr. Henry, I need to talk to you about something very important. Of course, boss, what is it? It's about my brother Thomas. Today I found out that he came back to the farm a few times over the years. Did you see anything? Henry lowered his head and let out a deep sigh. Boss, yes, I did. More times than you might think. And why did you never tell me? Because he asked me not to. He said he just wanted to see how you were doing, but he didn't want to cause any more trouble. Henry revealed that Thomas used to hide in the old abandoned barn at the edge of the property, where he could watch Arthur working without being seen. Sometimes he'd bring small gifts and leave them in the barn, like new tools or special seeds. Remember those new tools that used to show up in the barn every now and then? You always thought you'd forgotten where you bought them. It was him leaving them there. Arthur remembered the mysterious tools that appeared from time to time. He'd always thought his memory was failing with age. Did he ever say anything about his life? He said he had children, that he was doing well, but that he missed this place terribly. He said he made the biggest mistake of his life when he fought with you. Tears began to stream down Arthur's wrinkled face. 40 years of resentment and suffering could have been avoided if only he'd known Thomas was trying to reach out. He went home determined to find his brother, no matter where he was. Margaret didn't like the idea at all. Arthur, it's been 40 years. Why do you want to dig all that up now? Margaret, he's my brother. He could be going through hard times and I wouldn't even know. And what if he doesn't want to see you? What if it only brings more pain? The argument between the couple lasted for hours. Margaret had held a grudge against Thomas for all the tears she'd seen Arthur shed over the years. To her husband's brother was someone who had only caused pain and didn't deserve a second chance. David also spoke out against searching for his uncle. Dad, our family is the three of us. Why complicate our lives with someone who abandoned us? But Arthur was determined. The next morning he went to the registry office in the neighboring town, where the notary had mentioned that Thomas had bought a piece of land. The clerk, a young and helpful man, checked the records. Yes, we have the record right here. Thomas Harrison, your brother, isn't he? He bought a lot in the Greenfield neighborhood 6 years ago. Does he still live there? As far as I know, no. The land was sold 2 years ago, but I have the buyer's address. Maybe he knows where your brother moved. Arthur wrote down the address and headed to Greenfield. The new owner of the land, a local merchant named Richard, remembered Thomas well. Your brother was a very good man, Mr. Arthur. He always spoke of you with great affection. Did he say why he sold the land? He said he was moving to be closer to his children. He had health problems and needed help. Richard gave the address Thomas had left as a reference, a town about 125 miles away. Arthur wrote everything down and went home with a heavy heart. Margaret was even more upset when she learned Arthur wanted to travel to look for Thomas. Arthur, you're 68 years old. You're not going to go running after someone who might not even want to see you. Margaret, if I don't do this now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. The argument dragged on for days. David tried to convince his father he was making a mistake, but Arthur wouldn't change his mind. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like and, above all, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. A week later, Arthur got into his old pickup truck and set off for the town where Thomas was supposedly living. The 4-hour drive gave him time to think about everything that had happened over the past few days. When he arrived at the address, he found a simple house with exposed brick and a well-kept garden. A woman around 40 years old answered the door. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm looking for Thomas Harrison. I'm his brother." The woman's face lit up. "You're Arthur. Dad talked about you so much. My name is Sarah. I'm your brother's daughter." Arthur felt his legs go weak. He was standing before a niece he had never known. "Where is Thomas?" Sarah's smile faded. "Dad. Dad passed away 2 years ago. Heart problems." The world came crashing down on Arthur. 40 years waiting for a reconciliation that would never happen. Sarah invited him inside and called her 2 siblings, James and Jennifer. Thomas's 3 children received their uncle with a mix of emotion and sadness. "Dad never stopped talking about you," said James, a 35-year-old man with eyes identical to Thomas's. He regretted the fight they had until his last day. "Why did he never try to find me?" "He tried many times," answered Jennifer, the youngest of the 3, "but he always thought you wouldn't forgive him." Sarah brought out a box full of letters that Thomas had written to Arthur over the years, but had never had the courage to send. There were hundreds of letters, some just a few lines long, others with page after page of regret and longing. Arthur spent hours reading the letters, learning about the life Thomas had built far from the farm. He discovered that his brother had become a small farmer, that he loved the land as much as he did, that he had married a teacher named Susan and raised 3 wonderful children. He even bought that piece of land near the farm, Sarah told him. He wanted to build a house there to be close to you, but he never had the courage to reach out. What happened to the land? We had to sell it when Dad got sick. The doctors were expensive and... Arthur interrupted his niece. You went through financial hardship? A little, James admitted. But Dad always said the important thing was that the family stayed together. The guilt Arthur felt was unbearable. While he prospered on the inherited farm, his nieces and nephew had struggled while caring for their sick father. Did he leave anything for me? Sarah brought a sealed envelope with Arthur's name written in Thomas's shaky handwriting. Dad told us to deliver this only if you ever showed up here. With trembling hands, Arthur opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and some documents. My dear brother Arthur, if you are reading this letter, it means our children have met, and that perhaps it is not too late to heal the wounds of the past. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness after all the cruel words I said, but I want you to know that I regretted it every day of my life. The letter continued for several pages, telling about Thomas's life, his regrets, his love for the land and his family, and his wish that the coming generations not repeat the mistakes of the past. The documents were the deed to the small property Thomas had bought, transferring everything to Arthur with a single condition, that he take care of the 3 children as if they were his own. Dad always said the land should bring the family together, not tear it apart, Sarah explained. Arthur spent 3 days with his nieces and nephew, learning their stories, their struggles, and their dreams. Sarah was a teacher like her mother, James worked as a mechanic, and Jennifer was finishing veterinary school. On the last day, Arthur made a decision that would change everything. "I want you all to come with me to the farm. The land is big enough for all of us." The three siblings looked at each other, surprised. "Uncle, we can't accept that," said James. "You barely know us. You are my brother's children. You are my family, and I've already wasted too much time." The trip back to the farm was filled with emotion. The nieces and nephew followed Arthur in their own car, bringing only what they held most precious. Margaret and David did not take the news well that three strangers would be coming to live on the farm. "Arthur, have you lost your mind? How are you going to support 3 more people?" protested Margaret. "They're not strangers. They're family. And I'm not going to support them. We'll work together." The adjustment wasn't easy. Margaret treated her nieces and nephew coldly, still harboring resentment from the past. David felt threatened, fearing the newcomers would try to take his place at the farm. But Sarah, James, and Jennifer were determined to win the trust of their new family. Sarah helped Margaret around the house and in the garden, proving to be an excellent cook. James used his mechanical knowledge to fix the farm's old machinery. Jennifer cared for the sick animals and helped improve the cattle breeding. Little by little, the barriers began to break down. Margaret started to grow fond of Sarah, especially after the young woman taught her some recipes she had learned from her mother. David discovered that James was an excellent work partner, and the two began making plans to modernize certain aspects of the farm. But not everything was coming up roses. A severe drought hit the region, and the farm began facing financial difficulties. Arthur worried he wouldn't be able to support his extended family. That's when Jennifer had an idea. Using her veterinary knowledge, she proposed creating an animal care service for the region. Sarah suggested supplementing the farm's income with private lessons for the town's children. James proposed a farm machinery repair service. "Let's turn the farm into a service center for the whole region," said Sarah during a family meeting. The idea worked. Within a few months, Harrison Farm became a landmark in the region. Sarah's lessons attracted many students. Jennifer's veterinary clinic was always full, and James's workshop had a waiting list. Margaret finally admitted she had been wrong about her nieces and nephew. "Arthur, they're a blessing in our lives. Thomas raised wonderful children." David also changed his mind. "Dad, now I understand why you wanted to bring them here. We're stronger together." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and leave a like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. One day, Sarah found a box in the house's attic with old toys that Arthur and Thomas had made together as children. Wooden cars, colorful kites, and games invented by the two brothers. Uncle Dad had toys identical to these. He used to say they were the only toys he had in his childhood. Arthur held one of the wooden cars, remembering how he and Thomas would spend hours playing together before greed and pride tore their lives apart. "Do you want to see the place where I found your father's car?" The next day, Arthur took his nieces and nephew to the trail where Cooper had discovered Thomas's car. The vehicle was still there, now even more covered by vegetation. "Dad used to come here?" asked Jennifer, emotional. "According to Mr. Henry, he used to hide in the barn and come here to be close to me without my knowledge." James examined the car. This was the car Dad loved the most. He bought it right after leaving the farm. Arthur made a decision. "Let's restore this car. It will be our way of honoring Thomas's memory." The following months were dedicated to restoring the old blue car. The whole family took part in the project. David proved to be skilled with paint, Margaret sewed new upholstery, and the nieces and nephew handled the mechanical work. During the work, they uncovered more secrets from the past. In the glove compartment, they found purchase receipts that Thomas had made for the farm over the years. Fertilizers, seeds, tools, all bought anonymously and left in the barn. "He never stopped taking care of the farm," said Arthur, with tears in his eyes. "Dad used to say this land was in his blood, and that distance couldn't change that," recounted Sarah. The restoration of the car became an event in the region. Neighbors came by to follow the progress and hear the story of the Harrison brothers. Mrs. Dorothy confessed that she had seen Thomas several times over the years, always watching the farm from afar. "He used to ask about you, Arthur. He wanted to know if you were well, if you were happy. I always said yes, but I could tell he was suffering a lot." The town's parish priest, Father Michael, also revealed that Thomas sought him out regularly to confess and ask for advice on how to reconcile with his brother. He came every month, sometimes just to talk about you. He said he had made the biggest mistake of his life and didn't know how to fix it. Each revelation was like a knife to Arthur's heart, but also like a balm that healed old wounds. Knowing that Thomas had never stopped loving him brought a peace he hadn't felt in decades. The car was finished at the end of the year, gleaming like new. Arthur decided they would hold a special ceremony to honor Thomas's memory. On the day of the ceremony, the whole region showed up. Arthur gave an emotional speech about forgiveness, family, and second chances. "My brother Thomas is no longer here to hear my words, but his children are. And through them, I can say that I forgive him and ask for his forgiveness as well. 40 years of pride and resentment end today." Sarah, James, and Jennifer cried throughout the entire speech. After the ceremony, Arthur made another important decision. The farm will be divided equally between David and the three of you, just as it should have been done 40 years ago. David, who had initially resisted the idea of the cousins, now fully supported his father's decision. "Dad is right. We're a family, and we should share everything." But the surprises weren't over yet. A week after the ceremony, a lawyer showed up at the farm with documents that changed everything again. "Mr. Arthur, I represent the interests of the late Thomas Harrison. He left specific instructions to be carried out only after his reconciliation with you." "What instructions?" "Your brother bought several properties over the years, always close to your farm. Everything was left to you, on the condition that the families come together." The documents showed that Thomas had discreetly acquired nearly half of the lands neighboring the original farm. The accumulated wealth turned the Harrison family into one of the most prosperous in the region. "But how did he manage to buy all of this?" asked David. "Your brother became a successful businessman. Besides farming, he invested in several ventures, but he never forgot his roots." The final revelation came through a letter from Thomas himself, to be read only after the delivery of the documents. "Arthur, if you're reading this letter, it means our children finally came together, as I always dreamed. Every penny I earned throughout my life was earned with the thought of one day giving back to our family the prosperity our fight destroyed. The land separated us, but now it must unite us forever." Arthur realized that Thomas had spent 40 years silently working to rebuild what the fight had destroyed. Every property bought, every investment made, all with the goal of one day coming home. "Dad never gave up on you," said Sarah, hugging her uncle. "He always knew that one day we would all be together." From that day on, Harrison Farm became the largest agricultural enterprise in the region. With the new lands and the diverse expertise of the nephews and nieces, they created a sustainable farming model that became a benchmark. Sarah founded a rural school that served all the children in the region. Jennifer established a veterinary center that cared not only for the farm's animals but for the entire region. James set up a workshop that manufactured innovative agricultural machinery. David took over general administration, applying modern management methods he had learned in the city before returning to the farm. Margaret became the respected matriarch of a family that was constantly growing. Arthur, at 70 years old, finally found the peace he had been seeking for decades. Every morning, he walked to the place where Cooper had found Thomas's car, now marked by a small chapel that the family had built in memory of his brother. One morning, as he walked with Cooper along the trail, Arthur reflected on everything that had happened in the past few months. The discovery of the car had changed not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. "Thank you, Cooper," he said, petting the dog that had made it all possible. "If it weren't for you, I would have missed the chance to meet my nephews and nieces." The dog wagged its tail as if it understood the importance of its discovery. Arthur took out one of Thomas's letters, which he always carried in his pocket, and read once more the words that had changed his life. "The land should unite the family, not divide it. I hope our children are wiser than we were, and don't let pride destroy love." At that moment, Arthur understood that Thomas had gotten what he wanted. The Harrison family was united again, stronger than ever. In the late afternoon, the whole family gathered on the porch of the main house to watch the sunset over the vast lands they now cultivated together. Sarah held the newest member of the family, a baby born a few months earlier who had been named Thomas. "Grandpa Arthur, tell the baby the story of Uncle Thomas," asked Emily, Sarah's oldest daughter, just 5 years old. Arthur smiled and began to tell the story that had become a family legend. The story of two brothers who were separated by pride and reunited through the love of their children. Once upon a time there were two brothers who loved the land where they were born very much. As he told the story, Arthur looked at the attentive faces of his extended family. Sarah, who had inherited her mother's kindness and her father's determination. James, with hands calloused from honest work and a generous heart. Jennifer, with wisdom beyond her years and a passion for caring for others. David listened to the story as if it were the first time, even though he already knew it by heart. Margaret rocked little Thomas in her arms, humming a lullaby she had learned from her mother decades ago. "And did they live happily ever after?" asked Emily. "They learned that happiness doesn't come from having everything for yourself, but from sharing everything with those we love," answered Arthur. That night, before going to sleep, Arthur picked up the last document Thomas had left behind. It was a detailed plan to expand the farm, including plans for an agricultural school, a veterinary hospital, and a cooperative for small farmers. "Even after he's gone, he's still helping us grow," Arthur thought. The next day he gathered the whole family to present Thomas's plans. "Your father had thought of everything," he told his nephews and nieces. "He wanted our farm to become a development center for the entire region." The plans were ambitious but feasible. With the resources left by Thomas and the knowledge of the new generation, it would be possible to transform the entire region. Sarah was put in charge of the agricultural school project, which would teach modern farming techniques to young people in the area. Jennifer would run the veterinary hospital, which would treat animals belonging to small farmers free of charge. James would develop agricultural machinery adapted to local needs. David would coordinate the cooperative, helping small farmers sell their products at better prices. Conceição would oversee a project to preserve local culinary traditions. The project took 3 years to be fully implemented, but it transformed the region. Harrison Farm became a model of sustainable development, attracting visitors from all over the country. Arthur, now 73 years old, saw his most ambitious dreams come true, but what brought him the most joy was seeing the harmony among all family members. One afternoon he received a visit from a journalist who wanted to write about the farm's success. "Mr. Arthur, what's the secret to your success?" "There's no secret," he replied. "Just remember that family is the most important thing we have. Everything else is a consequence." The journalist asked about the story of the separated brothers, and Arthur told everything, from the fight to the reconciliation through their children. "Do you regret anything?" "I regret taking 40 years to understand that pride isn't worth a destroyed family. But I thank God every day for my nephews showing up in my life." The article about Harrison Farm was published in a national magazine, bringing even more recognition to the project. But for Arthur, the greatest reward was in the small everyday moments, like when Sarah called him for lunch with the same affection she would show a father, or when James came to ask for advice on how to expand his workshop, or when Jennifer kept him updated on the health of the animals. David had married a schoolteacher from town and had given Arthur 2 grandchildren. Sarah also started a family, marrying an agronomist who joined the farm project. James was dating the daughter of a neighboring farmer, and Jennifer had married a veterinarian she met during a conference. The main farmhouse, which once housed only Arthur, Margaret, and David, now buzzed with the noise of children running through the hallways and the constant bustle of a large family. On Sunday nights, everyone gathered for dinner at the big table James had built, especially to accommodate the whole family. They were always special moments, where each one shared the week's news and planned future projects. "Uncle Arthur," said Sarah at one of those dinners, "Jennifer had an interesting idea to expand our projects even further." "What idea?" "Creating an exchange program with other regions of the country. Young people from other farms would come to learn here, and our young people would go experience other realities. The idea was approved unanimously. Within a few months, Harrison Farm was receiving young people from several states, and its own young people traveled to learn about other experiences. The exchange program brought even more recognition to the farm. Universities began sending students to conduct research on sustainable agriculture. Government agencies wanted to replicate the model in other regions. But Arthur never forgot that it had all started with a chance discovery in the woods. Every morning, he continued his walk to the spot where Cooper had found Thomas's car. The dog was older now, with graying fur and slower movements, but he still loyally accompanied his owner on the morning walk. "You knew, didn't you, Cooper?" Arthur would say to the dog. "You knew that car would change our lives." Cooper would answer with a low bark, as if agreeing. The chapel built at the site of the discovery had become a pilgrimage point for people from the region facing family problems. Arthur had spread the story of the Harrison brothers' reconciliation, and many families found inspiration to resolve their own conflicts. One day, a young man of about 20 showed up at the farm asking for Arthur. "Mr. Arthur, my name is Ryan. I'm the great-grandson of Thomas Harrison." Arthur was confused. "Great-grandson, what do you mean?" "My grandfather was the brother of your nephews, the son Uncle Thomas had before he got married." The revelation brought a new wave of emotions. Ryan told how his grandfather had died young, but had always talked about the Harrison family and about Thomas's desire to reconcile with Arthur. "My great-grandfather left a letter for me, asking that I look for you when I became an adult." Ryan brought the letter, written by Thomas himself a few months before he passed. In it, he talked about this first son, whom he had raised with difficulty when he was very young, and his wish that all generations of the family would meet one another. "Welcome to the family," said Arthur, embracing the young man. "Your great-grandfather would be very happy to know that you found us." Ryan quickly integrated into the farm, bringing technological knowledge that perfectly complemented the existing projects. He created a digital system to manage all aspects of the farm and developed an app that connected small producers in the region. Ryan's arrival marked the beginning of a new phase of expansion. With his technological help, Harrison Farm managed to expand its reach even further, connecting with producers from all over the country through digital platforms. Arthur, now 75 years old, watched with pride as the family continued to grow and adapt to the new times. Each new member brought unique contributions, but they all shared the same values of unity and honest work. One morning, during his usual walk, Arthur noticed that Cooper was weaker than normal. The old dog had been his faithful companion for over 10 years and now showed clear signs of advanced age. Jennifer examined Cooper and confirmed what Arthur already suspected. The dog was at the end of his life, but felt no pain. "He had a good life, Uncle, and he did something very important for our family. In the last weeks of Cooper's life, the whole family took turns caring for him. The children insisted on playing with the dog every day, and the adults made sure he received all the affection possible. When Cooper finally passed away, Arthur decided to bury him in the exact spot where he had made the discovery that changed their lives. On the grave, they placed a plaque that read, "Cooper, the dog that brought a family together." The farewell ceremony was simple but moving. The whole family gathered to thank the animal that had made their union possible. "Cooper was not just a dog," said Arthur during the ceremony. "He was an instrument of destiny to correct the mistakes of the past." After the ceremony, Sarah made a suggestion that deeply touched Arthur's heart. "Uncle, what if we created a memorial not just for Cooper, but for our entire family history? A place where future generations can learn the story of the Harrison brothers." The idea evolved into the creation of a small museum on the farm, telling the story from the first Harrisons who arrived in the region to the reconciliation of the families. The museum included Thomas's restored car, old photographs, the never-sent letters, and personal belongings of the brothers. The Harrison Family Memorial was inaugurated 2 years later, with the presence of local authorities and hundreds of visitors. The space became a tourist attraction in the region, but more importantly, a place of reflection on the importance of forgiveness and family unity. Arthur, now 77 years old, used to receive visitors personally, telling the story with the passion of someone who lived every moment intensely. "The greatest lesson I learned," he would say at the end of every visit, "is that it's never too late to forgive and start over." 40 years seemed like an eternity, but true love has no expiration date. During one of these visits, an elderly woman approached Arthur with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Arthur, my name is Susan. I was Thomas's wife." Arthur was in shock. Thomas's wife was still alive and had appeared at the farm. "Susan, but their children said you had." "We went our separate ways," she explained. "Thomas passed away first and I went to live with a daughter in another state. But I always wanted to meet his family." Susan, a 72-year-old lady with white hair and gentle eyes, recounted that she had followed all of Harrison Farm's achievements through her children. "Thomas would be so proud to see everything you've accomplished," she said, looking around the thriving farm. "Why did you never come before?" "I was afraid I wouldn't be welcomed. After all, I was part of the life Thomas built away from the family." Arthur hugged her warmly. "Susan, you're the mother of my nieces and nephews. That makes you my family too." Susan's arrival brought a new emotional dimension to the family. She had kept hundreds of photographs and documents of Thomas that complemented the history the family already knew. Susan also brought recipes that Thomas loved and that she had learned to make especially for him. Margaret was moved to discover that some of these recipes came from family traditions she had lost over the years. "Thomas talked a lot about the food from his childhood," Susan told Margaret. "He tried to teach me the recipes he remembered from his mother." The two ladies spent days in the kitchen, recreating traditional dishes and sharing memories of Thomas. It was a healing process for both, who found in cooking a way to honor the memory of the man they had both loved. Susan decided to stay at the farm, moving into a small cottage that the family built especially for her. Her presence brought new energy to the place, especially for the children, who gained a new grandmother full of stories to tell. With Susan at the farm, Sunday dinners became even more special. She took over part of the cooking alongside Margaret, and the meals became true celebrations of the region's traditional cuisine. Arthur watched these moments with deep gratitude. At 78, he saw his family grow not only in number, but in love and unity. One afternoon, while resting on the porch watching the activity of the farm, Arthur reflected on everything that had happened since that morning when Cooper had discovered the blue car. The farm now employed over 50 people from the region. The agricultural school trained young farmers every year. The veterinary hospital treated hundreds of animals every month. The cooperative had tripled the income of local small farmers. But more important than all these numbers was the human transformation he had witnessed. Margaret, who once held a grudge against Thomas, now cared for Susan as if she were her own sister. David, who had feared the arrival of his cousins, now considered them his best friends and partners. Sarah had become a nationally respected educator. James had developed agricultural machinery that was exported to other countries. Jennifer was considered one of the best veterinarians in the region. Ryan had revolutionized the farm's management with his technological innovations. And Susan, who had arrived afraid of not being accepted, was now the matriarch, loved by everyone. "Thomas," Arthur murmured, looking up at the sky. "You did it. The family is united, the land is prosperous, and love conquered pride." That night, Arthur picked up a sheet of paper and began to write. He wanted to document all the feelings and reflections of recent years so that future generations would understand the importance of reconciliation. "To my children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, I write this letter so that you never forget that forgiveness is the greatest force in the world." 40 years of separation could have been avoided if Thomas and I had had the humility to recognize our mistakes. The letter went on for several pages, serving as a testament not only of material value, but of emotional value for the entire family. The next day, he gathered everyone together to read the letter aloud. There wasn't a dry eye in the room when he finished. "This letter will stay in the memorial," said Arthur, "so that everyone who visits our space understands that our story isn't just about agriculture or prosperity, but about the transformative power of family love." A few months later, Harrison Farm received a special visit. A group of researchers from an American university wanted to study the sustainable development model implemented on the property. "Mr. Arthur," said the team leader, We've never seen such a successful project that combines economic prosperity with social development and environmental preservation. The secret isn't in the techniques, Arthur replied. It's in the people who work together toward a common goal. The researchers' visit resulted in a documentary about Harrison Farm that was shown in several countries. The story of the brothers who were separated and reconciled through their children touched people all over the world. Arthur received invitations to give lectures at universities and agriculture events, but he always made a point of making it clear that the true credit belonged to the whole family. "I'm just the man who was lucky enough to find my brother's car," he would say. "The rest was all of us working together." At 80 years old, Arthur began thinking about the farm's succession. Although he was still active and sharp-minded, he wanted to ensure the transition happened smoothly. He gathered David, Sarah, James, Jennifer, and Ryan for an important conversation. "The time has come for you to take over the farm completely. I'll stay on as an advisor, but the important decisions need to be made by you." The transition was done gradually, with each one taking on specific responsibilities. David took over general administration, Sarah took the educational projects, James took the industrial side, Jennifer took the veterinary projects, and Ryan took technology. Arthur watched with pride as his successors worked in harmony, always consulting one another before making important decisions. One morning, he received a visit from a young reporter who wanted to write a book about stories of family reconciliation. "Mr. Arthur, how would you define the greatest lesson of your life?" Arthur thought for a few minutes before answering. "The greatest lesson is that time doesn't heal all wounds. What heals wounds is love and the willingness to forgive. I lost 40 years with my brother because I didn't have the courage to take the first step. But I was lucky enough to get to know his children, and through them, find the peace I was looking for." Would you like to leave a message for families going through similar situations? I'd like to say that it's never too late to start over. It doesn't matter how long the fight lasted. It doesn't matter how deep the hurt is. True love always finds a way to overcome pride. The reporter's book became a bestseller, inspiring thousands of families around the world to seek reconciliation. Arthur, now 82 years old, spent most of his time on the house's porch, watching the farm's activity and receiving visitors who came to learn about his story. One afternoon, his great-granddaughter Emily, now 15, approached him with a question. "Grandpa Arthur, do you remember what it was like before the aunts and uncles arrived?" "I do, sweetheart. It was an emptier life, even if I didn't realize it at the time." "And do you miss anything from back then?" Arthur smiled. "The only thing I miss is the time I lost without knowing you all. But I learned that it's better to focus on the present we have than on the past we lost." Emily hugged her great-grandfather. "Grandpa, you're the wisest person I know." "Wisdom doesn't come with age, dear. It comes from the mistakes we make and the lessons we learn from them." That night, Arthur picked up the last volume of the diary he had begun writing after the discovery of the car. There were 10 volumes documenting the entire transformation of the family and the farm. He wrote his final entry. "Today, I understand that Cooper didn't just find an abandoned car that morning. He found a second chance for our family, an opportunity to correct the mistakes of the past and build a better future. Thomas, wherever you are, I hope you know your mission was fulfilled. The Harrison family is united forever." The next morning, Arthur was found sleeping peacefully in his favorite armchair on the porch, with the diary open on his lap and a serene smile on his face. Arthur's funeral was a celebration of his life and everything he had built. Hundreds of people attended, from local neighbors to government officials and international researchers. David gave the main speech, recalling how his father had turned a casual discovery into a life lesson for the whole family. "My father taught us that the land doesn't divide, it unites. That family isn't just blood, it's choice, and that forgiveness is the most powerful force in the universe." Sarah, James, Jennifer, and Ryan also spoke, each telling how Arthur had changed their lives by opening the doors of the farm to them. Susan, now 80 years old, gave an emotional speech about how Arthur had honored Thomas's memory better than any tribute ever could. "Arthur didn't just forgive my husband," she said through tears. He loved his children as if they were his own. Thomas would be so proud. Margaret, at 78, spoke last. Arthur always said he found a family in Thomas's car. But the truth is, the family was already here waiting to be discovered. He just had the courage to open his heart. Arthur was laid to rest beside the chapel that marked the spot where Cooper had found Thomas's car. His headstone bore only one phrase: "Here rests Arthur Harrison, the man who chose love over pride." After the funeral, the family gathered to read Arthur's will. In addition to dividing all his assets equally among the 5 heirs, he had left specific instructions for the story of reconciliation to continue being told. "I want you to turn our story into an example for other families." The will read, "May Harrison Farm continue to be a place where forgiveness conquers resentment and where unity overcomes division." David officially took over leadership of the farm, but maintained the shared decision-making system Arthur had established. All the projects continued to grow, always honoring the values of unity and honest work that had turned a simple discovery into a family revolution. The Harrison Family Memorial received a new wing dedicated exclusively to Arthur, telling his story from the fight with Thomas to the reconciliation through his nephews. Harrison Farm continued to prosper and expand. New projects were implemented, always following the principles of sustainability and social responsibility that Arthur had established. Sarah became the dean of an agricultural university. James exported his machinery to several countries. Jennifer founded an animal protection NGO. Ryan developed apps that helped small farmers across the country. But they all always returned to the farm on Sundays, keeping alive the tradition of family dinners that Arthur loved so much. Susan lived to be 90 years old, telling Thomas's stories to her great-grandchildren and keeping the family's traditional recipes alive. Margaret reached 85, always proud of having witnessed the transformation of a broken family into a prosperous and united dynasty. 10 years after Arthur's passing, the Harrison family had more than 50 members spread across the country, but all connected by the values he had taught. Emily, the great-granddaughter who had grown up hearing stories about her great-grandfather, became a journalist and wrote a book telling the entire Harrison family saga. The book became a classic on family reconciliation. The spot where Cooper had found Thomas's car became a pilgrimage site for families in conflict. Thousands of people visited the place every year, seeking inspiration to resolve their own family problems. The farm continued to be a model of sustainable development, but its greatest contribution to the world remained the lesson that love and forgiveness can transform any situation. On a sign at the entrance to the property, a phrase summed up the entire philosophy of Harrison Farm. Here we learned that the land does not divide families. It unites them when there is enough love to overcome pride. The story of the farmer and the dog who found a car covered in leaves became legendary in the region, passed down from generation to generation as an example of how a small discovery can change entire lives. And every Sunday, when the family gathered for dinner, someone always told the story of Arthur and Thomas to the children, ensuring that the lesson of reconciliation was never forgotten. The greatest inheritance Arthur left behind was not the prosperous lands or the successful businesses. It was the certainty that it is never too late to forgive, never too late to start over, and never too late to choose love over pride. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this emotional story about forgiveness and family reconciliation. Do you believe Arthur made the right decision in seeking out his brother, even after 40 years? Leave your opinion in the comments and share if you have ever experienced a similar situation in your family. Don't forget to leave your like if the story touched your heart and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that will move your soul. Thank you for your company up to this point.